Everyone lies when they say they're fine. No one wakes up at 7 a.m., drinks cold coffee, and spends 2 hours in traffic out of love for life. You know that. Most people don't live, they endure. Have you noticed how everyone seems too busy to think? Constantly distracted by something, notifications, gossip, debt, shows they don't even like, relationships they barely tolerate. Why? Because stopping is dangerous. Stopping means thinking, and thinking means facing the one question we've been avoiding since childhood. Why does all this exist if it's only going to end? One philosopher, Peter Wessel Zapffe, had the courage to give an answer no one wanted to hear. He said consciousness is a mistake, a defect of nature. We're the only animals that know we're going to die, and yet we're forced to live as if that knowledge doesn't slowly destroy us from the inside. Don't you feel it too? That emptiness that appears on Sunday nights, when the music stops, when the feed goes quiet, when the room gets dark and the silence gets heavy? The truth is unbearable, so we invented lies. Beautiful lies, useful lies. You call them purpose. You call them faith. You call them hope. Zapffe called them defenses against reality. He said there are four psychological mechanisms that humans created not to find truth, but to avoid going insane from it. You use them every single day. And in this series, we'll uncover what they are and why you rely on them. But I'll warn you, you might not like what you find. Because once you realize your life might be a carefully constructed illusion, there's no going back. So, let's begin. Every child discovers death before turning 7, and almost every child stops asking about it after 8. Not because they understand it, but because they realize that nobody wants to talk about it. It's as if everyone at some point silently signed a contract. We don't talk about the things that scare us. That's the first defense mechanism Zapffe described, denial. But denial isn't just refusing to face facts. It's cutting pieces out of your own awareness to make life feel tolerable. When a human being becomes self-aware, it's like being thrown into an endless abyss. Denial is the fake rope ladder pretending to lead to safety. You see the pact of denial everywhere, in small talk, in empty motivational quotes, and how we normalize daily suffering as just life. How many times have you heard someone ask, "You okay?" and accept, "Yeah, I'm fine," as the truth, even when their eyes are screaming for help? How many times have you been that person? We deny death. We deny pain, emptiness, absurdity. We even deny the fact that we're in denial, because admitting it would rip apart the thin layer of comfort that covers our entire civilization. We're trained not to think, to smile while we sink. But denial isn't harmless, it's functional. Zapffe saw this with brutal clarity. He said humans developed a level of awareness that nature never intended for survival. In his words, we're a failed experiment of evolution. That's why we must deny, not as a choice, but as a psychic survival mechanism. Think about hospitals. In many cultures, doctors still hide the full truth from terminal patients. They say it's for the patient's good, but really it's to keep the pact of denial unbroken, because one person seeing too clearly can infect everyone around them with awareness, and that's dangerous. So we keep denying instability, randomness, inevitable pain, inevitable loss. We cover tragedy with comforting words. We call it a challenge. We call it a lesson. But it's the same old defense at work. Don't speak, don't think, don't feel, or the abyss will swallow you. Yet the abyss never left. It's always been there, waiting. And those who dare look into it without filters, without anesthetic, risk understanding too much. And as Zapffe said, to understand is to suffer. You don't know the name of the child who starved to death yesterday, and deep down, you prefer not to. Because if you did, you'd have to feel something real, and feeling something real could collapse the fragile system that keeps you standing. The world is falling apart, but your bubble of routine stays intact. Sugar in your coffee, emails, the same jokes on WhatsApp, the same road to work, the same excuse to not think too much. You call that a well-organized life. Zapffe called it existential isolation. Humans isolate disturbing experiences, lock them away in psychic boxes, like storing poison in labeled jars. Not opening them is an unconscious choice, and a necessary one. If our consciousness opened fully to all the pain, injustice, chaos, and absurdity of existence, we would collapse. That's why you don't see. Not because you're blind, but because you've learned not to look. Isolation works like software running quietly in the background, filtering, cutting, muting, keeping horror far enough away so you can still function. It's like a fridge full of rotten meat, sealed shut so no one smells the decay inside. Society rewards this blindness. It calls it emotional stability, focus, productivity. But what's emotionally stable in a world that collapses daily? Syrian children buried under rubble, elderly people dying alone in care homes, animals ground alive to become feed. All of that is happening right now, but your brain can't handle it. So you do what everyone does. You compartmentalize, you close, you lock. Here's the part without escape. Isolation isn't just individual, it's collective, it's cultural, institutionalized. That's why you can go months without hearing about war in Sudan, but you never miss an update about a celebrity fight. The information is there. You've just been trained to avoid it. Because touching reality too directly is like touching a live wire. You feel everything all at once. And for a second, you understand too much. The excess of lucidity paralyzes, Zapffe wrote. And so humanity protects itself with glass domes for the mind. Domes made of distraction, superficiality, and comfortable silence. You think you're safe, but safety and blindness are not the same thing. You just have to choose. Do you want to stay protected, or do you want to be aware? You believe in things you never chose. You think you love your country, but you didn't design its flag. You defend a religion, but it reached you through geography, not revelation. You call it conviction, but it's inheritance, conditioning, cultural habit. It's your anchor. And it doesn't show you truth, it keeps you from drowning. Zapffe was direct. Anchoring means giving meaning to what has none. It's turning chaos into a story, even if that story is a lie. Humans can't handle the void. We can't stand knowing we're floating in an indifferent universe, with no manual, no justice, no promise of reward. So we plant roots in myths, symbols, traditions. We cling to ideas of family, nation, God, legacy, not because they're real, but because without them, everything feels unbearably random. The problem is that these anchors become prisons. You live to be a good parent, a good spouse, a good citizen, because you were told that's noble. But have you ever asked if these roles free you or consume you? Soldiers die for causes they don't understand. Parents suffocate their children, repeating patterns they never questioned. Believers spread hate in the name of love. It's not about attacking values. It's about asking where they come from and who benefits from your obedience. Anchoring means accepting a ready-made meaning and stopping the search where the question should begin. The truth is free, but humans choose cages, as long as the cage has a beautiful name. Zapffe saw this craving for meaning as a sign of panic. We're not rational beings, we're terrified beings pretending to be calm. And in our desperation, any story will do, as long as it protects us from the vertigo of not knowing why we're here. Even science becomes an anchor when it turns into blind faith. Even love becomes an anchor when it justifies fear and attachment. You don't need to believe in anything to be free, but freedom scares us because it offers no promises. That's why most people keep believing in flags, creeds, or scripts. Not because they're true, but because they keep us from falling apart. And maybe that's fine until you realize you've been walking in circles, chained to an anchor that was never yours. Every masterpiece begins as a scream no one could silence. What we call art often starts with pain. What we call beauty is sometimes just suffering polished until it shines enough not to kill the one who feels it. Zapffe said that since humans can't destroy suffering, we try to turn it into language. We sublimate it. We transform tragedy into expression, into art, theory, music. It doesn't save us, but it entertains us long enough to keep going. Entertainment becomes essential because sublimation doesn't heal. It just rearranges pain into something we can look at without breaking. The broken poet writes about absence. The suicidal musician composes songs of hope. Not because they're fine, but because it's either that or silence forever. Think about Van Gogh, Sylvia Plath, Kurt Cobain. You admire them, but you forget they were bleeding while they created and the world only applauded after it was too late. They sublimated their pain, but they didn't survive it. Sublimation delays the collapse, it doesn't prevent it. It's the most intelligent defense because it's the most complex. Unlike denial or isolation, sublimation looks the absurd in the eye, but covers it with metaphor. Pain becomes art. Emptiness becomes philosophy. Death becomes poetry. But beneath it all, it's still chaos framed in gold. Zapffe saw this clearly. Even the deepest philosophies, the grandest ideologies, the most beautiful works are human constructions made to make life look less like a tragic mistake. They are, but they're still constructions. Modern science even shows our brains are wired to find patterns where there are none. It's an evolutionary trick. Finding meaning helps us avoid paralysis. That's what sublimation does. It turns screams into stories. You can call it art, religion, love, literature, but underneath, it's suffering, trying to be useful, trying to justify itself, trying to say, if I suffered, at least let it mean something. But what if it doesn't? What if beauty is just the makeup of despair? Sublimation lets you keep going, but keeps you trapped. Even when you turn pain into gold, it's still pain. Polished, decorated, sold, but untouched. Maybe that's the only truth left. Humans are the only creatures that suffer and still try to make poetry out of it. Most people only think seriously about life after losing someone. There's no philosophy more honest than grief. You can study religions, go to therapy, read every self-help book, chant every optimistic mantra, but none of it makes sense in front of a coffin. There are no metaphors, no lessons, no "this too shall pass," only silence and emptiness. Zapffe called this consciousness awakened without escape. Life became aware of itself and collapsed under the weight of that awareness. Everything we built, family, career, spirituality, art, exists to distract us from that collapse. But when all defenses fail, what's left? The truth. And the truth is simple. There's no guaranteed meaning. None. The universe doesn't owe you fairness. Existence doesn't need a reason. You were born because two bodies met, not because a cosmic purpose chose you. Pain isn't a test. Tragedy isn't a lesson. Death isn't a doorway. Those are just beautiful words we invented so we wouldn't go insane. Zapffel's proposal was radical but honest. The only truly ethical act, he said, was to prevent another conscious being from suffering the same curse. That's the foundation of existential antinatalism, not hatred of life, but extreme compassion. To not bring new life into the world isn't rejection, it's respect for the weight of existence. You can call it radical, nihilistic, pessimistic, but that's just what people say when they don't want to look directly at the truth. Pessimism doesn't wish for evil, it simply admits that evil exists, and maybe it's built into the structure of reality itself. There's no redemption for consciousness. It is, as Zapffe wrote, the open wound of the cosmos. So the question becomes inevitable. Is it worth living knowing all this? There's no universal answer. Some will keep pretending. Others will keep creating. A few will simply breathe, accept, and continue, without illusions. But after hearing this, you can't say you didn't know. Now the choice is yours. Return to the lie, or bear the weight of reality. If you've made it this far, I have to tell you something honestly. Very few people can look at reality without anesthesia. Very few have the courage to take off their masks and keep breathing. You not only stayed, you felt, you thought, you allowed yourself to be disturbed. And just for that, you're already supporting this work in a powerful way. Because every person who watches until the end, who shares, who talks about it with someone else, helps this message stay alive in a world where every honest effort for truth is fragile and needs breath to survive. If you want to go further, if you want to help keep raw, unfiltered consciousness alive, you can subscribe this channel. Most people live as if they'll never die, and die as if they never lived. They chase comfort, stability, reputation, everything that keeps them numb enough to forget the truth. But life doesn't wait for your healing, your plans, or your beliefs. It just moves, indifferent, mechanical, unstoppable. And in that current, humans cling to illusions like driftwood. Religion promises eternity. Society promises progress. Love promises meaning. But none of them can stop time. They just distract you from feeling its pull. Zapffe saw this clearly. We're not equipped for the awareness we have. Our minds evolved to survive, not to understand. But understanding came anyway, and with it, suffering. Consciousness is both the gift and the curse. You see the beauty, but you also see the decay. You experience love, but you know it ends. You laugh, but you know it fades. You build, but you know it crumbles. And still, you go on. That's the human tragedy. To know everything dies, yet to keep pretending otherwise. Society runs on denial. Entire industries exist to sell you the illusion of control, self-help, spirituality, productivity, luxury, even hope. But all of it feeds the same fear, the terror of nothingness. We hide it behind words like purpose, growth, manifestation. Yet deep down, we know it's all scaffolding around a void. And the void doesn't care. It doesn't punish or reward. It just is. That's what terrifies people. Not evil, not death, the indifference. So we overcompensate. We turn emptiness into stories. We baptize chaos with meaning. We call this life. Zapfe's brilliance wasn't in pessimism. It was in honesty. He didn't romanticize despair. He dissected it. He saw that our entire civilization is built on coping mechanisms, structured, refined, disguised. The moment you stop clinging, you see it all collapse. That's why people fear awakening. It's not enlightenment, it's exposure. You realize the mask was never the problem. It was your face beneath it. True awareness isn't peace, it's clarity. It burns through illusion until there's nothing left to hold. Most can't handle that. They retreat. They find a new anchor, a new God, a new purpose. But some stay in the fire, and those who stay change. They stop seeking happiness and start seeking truth. They stop asking, what's the meaning of life? And start asking, why do I need it to have one? That's when something strange happens. You stop fighting existence and start seeing it for what it is. Not good, not bad, just there. And within that neutrality, a new kind of peace appears. Not joy, not fulfillment, just acceptance. And maybe that's the closest thing to freedom humans will ever know. Every generation thinks it's special, chosen, different. But the same story repeats. Birth, struggle, delusion, decay. We call it progress because the furniture changes. But underneath, it's the same primal fear wearing modern clothes, the same hunger for meaning, the same dread of death, the same refusal to see that we're temporary. We build skyscrapers over graves and call it civilization. We invent technologies to simulate connection and call it community. We drown in noise and call it freedom. But the human condition hasn't evolved. It's only disguised itself better. Zapfe's insight wasn't that life is meaningless. It's that our need for meaning is what traps us. Every ideology, every revolution, every religion, they start as an escape, not as enlightenment. Humans can't accept the void, so they fill it with politics, with art, with love, with anything that distracts from the truth that nothing lasts. We keep repeating the same mistake, mistaking coping for progress. We say we're getting smarter, but intelligence only amplifies the despair. The more we know, the less we can lie to ourselves. Technology shows us the scale of the universe and how insignificant we are in it. Science explains everything except why. And still we cling to the myth that knowledge will save us. But knowledge doesn't save. It exposes. The truth doesn't heal. It strips away anesthesia. Most people can't bear that, so they return to comforting lies. Tradition, routine, entertainment, faith. They rebuild their cages and call it purpose. But those who don't, those who stay exposed, learn something that can't be taught. That the search for meaning was the real illusion. That maybe existence doesn't need a reason. That maybe nothingness is not a curse, but a return. You stop asking, why am I here? And start seeing that the question itself is the trap. The mind demands a purpose because it can't tolerate silence. But if you sit in that silence long enough, it stops being terrifying. It becomes vast, free, unbound. That's when you understand what the mystics meant by liberation, not eternal joy, but release from the need for joy, not transcendence, but dissolution. And that's the paradox Zapffe left us with. The more awake you are, the less there is to hold on to. Awareness doesn't lead to happiness, it leads to emptiness. But within that emptiness, something pure remains. Not hope, not despair, just clarity. And clarity is the only thing that can't be taken from you.